Are you getting all of your lip flapping out of the way?
Oh, no one can stop my lips from flapping.
I don't even want to try.
Hello and welcome to Add It to the List, the show where we binge watch a season of an anime and then talk about whether or not we think it deserves to go on your watch list. I'm Jack, and with me, as always, is Forrest.
Hello.
Beware spoilers for the first season and only season of this week's anime, Persona 4 the Animation, which means perhaps I should have gone, welcome to the Velvet Podcast. Trigger warnings for some body dysmorphia issues, and some discussion of self-harm and honestly just not great emotional manipulation in romantic relationships. So, Forrest, what is your exposure to this show going into it?
Literally zero. That's a lie. Because we have played the fighting game, but that was very minor exposure because clearly I didn't remember that much about like who was who and who had what persona. But before that, I had zero experience with this series. I was aware of the fact that you liked it, but
I do like it.
I had never approached it in any manner. I literally knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. It was like 100% blind, 99% blind.
Fair enough. Yeah, like you were saying, I have a lot of exposure to this franchise. I've spent hundreds of hours in Persona 4 Golden. I've done a handful of completed playthroughs. I got into it back in high school, where a buddy of mine was like, Jack, you're a big old weeb like me. I feel like this would be something that you're into. And I'm like, all right, I'll play like the first few like days on your PlayStation. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I really like this. But then, because I didn't have a PS3 or PS4, I couldn't play Golden or like a Vita at the time. And so I just like wasn't able to play that game for like 2 years. And then I came back to it and I loved it. I love it a bunch. After that, I played through the rhythm game. I believe it's Dancing All Night. There are a handful of Persona rhythm games. I can't remember which one is the subtitle for the one that's based off of 4 and which one is based off of 5. And I feel like there was one for 3, or I feel like maybe 3 was just wrapped up in the other ones. Anyway, I've spent a lot of time with these characters, so I was very invested in how they were depicted and how they were shown in the anime. To that end, I actually watched the show in English. I watched the dub because I tried to watch the sub and I'm like, nope, that's not what Igor sounds like. That's not what nope. No one sounds like that. You're wrong. I can't.
Yeah, whereas I watched the sub because I did not have that experience. I was just like, why would I watch the dub?
Yeah. In short, Persona 4, the animation, is a show about a cast of kids becoming friends and discovering themselves whilst solving a case of serial murders in their sleepy Japanese town of what the dub in the game calls Inaba, but what I've been given to understand is more correctly pronounced Inaba, which also took an adjustment period because in the game they just go with Inaba, and then because there were 3 years between the game and the show, they do it right in the dub in the show, and I'm like, oh, this is fine, but this is weird. There was definitely a point while I was watching this where I'm like, no, it's not how that works. No, it's wrong. And then, but like honestly, by the end of the first episode, I'm like, you know what, this is different, and they're doing like I respect what they're doing, and they're doing it well. Honestly. A little bit of like bigger picture spoilers. I do think that like most of the characters are pretty well preserved, and I think a lot of the relationships are pretty well reserved as well. By nature of condensing everything that happens into 26 episodes rather than, 100 or so hours of gameplay, some characters are a little bit worse, Some characters are a little bit better. The bad comic relief characters and their bad problematic comic relief moments, there aren't that many of them, and we don't linger on them as long. Conversely, though, when the better, more well-rounded dynamic aspects of characters, we just don't get to see as often because there's just not that much, as much time in it. And you take a little, you get a little, but I'm honestly very, very glad with where the show is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I said when I was watching the show was this just feels like I'm watching an abbreviated video game, because there's just so many points where I'm oh, I can see how that would just be much more expanded upon when you're playing the video game and not just this one character interaction.
Yeah. This is where I would cut in general if you were interested in playing the video game. If you want to play Persona 4, first of all, play Persona 4 Golden. It's strictly better. And that's not a sort of thing, but they make quality of life adjustments to it, and there's just more content in the game. Persona as a game is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei games, and for whatever reason, since Persona 3, they've sort of had this release structure of game. A couple years later, the Game Plus. And so, yeah, go ahead and play Persona 4 Golden if you're interested in playing the game. If you're interested in playing the game, rather. If you were not interested, or if you're interested in playing the game but don't mind knowing what happens in the plot, then keep listening. We'll do a full spoilers off later, but for now, spoiler light. If you are interested in playing the game spoiler free, then maybe come back in 120 hours.
That's a long video game.
It really can be. Or you can jam through it pretty quickly if you just I'll talk about it. So the show episodes on my sweet baby boy Igor and Margaret, they are attendants in what's called the Velvet Room, which in this game takes the form of a limousine. And the Velvet Room, as they explain, is sort of this place that exists between the dream realm and the realm of reality. As far as they go, they don't do much in the show. In the game, they're how you get tutorialized, and they're how you fuse personas into new personas, and Margaret's her own social links being the in-game representation of your relationships that then unlock you different types of personas to summon.
I was going to say that I don't think the show does a very good job of that they're talking to the main character at the beginning of every episode. But I feel since that is never shown, it is just kind of they show up on the screen. It almost feels like they're more so talking to you, which I understand would be what being the player would be But there were many times where I kind of forgot oh yeah, they're talking to the main character right now, because it's never really shown exactly why they or how they communicate with them. It might be shown in the first time they encounter. Yeah, it's just odd for me.
That's fair. I actually like it specifically because it is oh yeah, this is how it yeah, you forget that the character Narukami, who's the main character's canonical name, you can name him whatever silly thing that you want to name him in the game. Yeah, when you're playing through, the game really goes out of its way to make it so that you forget that you is there. He's a silent protag, which very much actually translated over well to the video or to the animation. Yeah, so he's taking the train to the sleepy little town of Inaba, where he's going to be spending a year because his parents are working overseas. So he's moving in with his dad, uncle, Dojima, and his cousin sister, Nanako, in the context of the story and how you interact with them. They're your dad and they're your sister. That's or not the context of the story, within the context of the relationship that you grow and develop throughout the story. That's just realistically what they are. Yeah, so you show up to this sleepy little town. Episode 1, you're going through your school day. You're introduced to a handful of the main cast. King Moron is your homeroom teacher. He's the stereotype of a teacher who just does not like kids. I think everybody can drum up at least one high school teacher where you're wow, This is like your fallback career. You had a teaching certificate and you couldn't cut it in like what you wanted to do, and so now you're here and you're making it our problem that you have to put up with us. Like, he is a very aggressive teacher.
Yeah.
You get introduced to Yosuke Hanamura, Chie Santanaka, and Yukiko Amagi in this first episode. All that you really see of Yusuke is that he gets beaten up by Chie because he broke a DVD of hers. Get it, girl. I hate Yosuke. And he also crashes into a bunch of garbage cans at least twice. And then at this point, you don't really know that too terribly much about Yukiko. She's like depicted as this like really beautiful girl who's really shy, really quiet. Not that too terribly much happens until they're walking home from school. The body of a TV announcer is hanging upside down from a telephone wire. Yeah, no one really knows what's going on, but they just sort of keep going. They meet up at Junes, which is this standard department store. It's a Walmart with a food court.
Do they call it Junes in the English? Or do they call it Junes?
They call it Junes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, is it Junes in the Japanese media?
No, in Japanese it is Junes, but like that just seems like a Japanese pronunciation of Junes. Like,
I think it's because they play the jingle so often.
Yeah.
That like it would just every day's great at your Junes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think that they could have like cut out the syllable and make it work with the lip flaps. But also just like in the game, they had like originally translated it as Junes.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, Yosuke, we find out he is also relatively new to the city, or the town really. He's there because his dad was brought in to manage this branch of Junes. So he's not like the new kid, but he is sort of like still resentful. So the reason why they're at Junes is he offers to buy pro-tag lunch for helping him out and getting him out of the trash can that morning, because this is the second. So day one, he's in the trash can. You leave him be. Day two, he's in the trash can. You're like, I should help him. And so he offers to like buy you like a nice lunch to help, like in exchange for helping him out. And then Chie goes, oh, so you're making it up to people, are you? Well, buy me food too. And once Chie tags along, he cheaps out and takes them to the food court. When we're there, we're introduced to a character by the name of Saki Kanoshi. She is this girl that Yosuke works with. She's a year or two older than them. Yosuke has this big old crush on her. Nothing really happens in that scene, but once they get home, they see like on the news that night that she is being interviewed as a witness to that, like the one who found the body. It rains. You kind of gets this weird like nightmare thing about like getting pulled into the TV. He manages to free himself, but when he's talking to Chie and Yosuke about it the next day, they're like, well, that's obviously a dream, but hey, if you're saying that you couldn't fit because you were too big for your tiny TV in your room, let's take you to Junes and see if we can get you in those big flat screens. They go. He can. Out of shock, Yosuke sort of just like goes, ah, and then knocks all of them in.
Oh yeah, I forgot that happened so early on. They just kind of like become friends, and then they're just like friends from there on. Like it's just like they're just like, bam, we're friends now.
Yeah, it's pretty quick in the game too, but like this first episode condenses like your first week of like gameplay.
Yeah, I guess it is like a week that they're kind of getting to know each other.
Yeah, and so within the TV, they're in this like full world that's shrouded in like fog, and it's weird and they can't see through it. They walk around and then they find like this room with a noose made out of a scarf. And while they're there, there's like posters of the murdered news reporter and all that. And it's really weird. There's a joke about Yosuke having to piss. And then they run into Teddy. I hate Teddy. Teddy is a terrible character. He's better in the show just because we see him be terrible less often. Teddy is a terrible character. He is the mascot character though. I definitely have a 3DS case that has a decal of him inside of it because I bought the Persona Q, which was like the 3DS Persona 3, Persona 4 fan fiction Shin Megami Tensei game.
The fuck?
I bought like the collector's edition of that, and it came with a 3DS case, and there's like all of like the chibi versions of all of the characters on one side, and then like the label on the other side, and then in the like inside there's the mascot character, which is a dog. from 3 on one side and then a mascot character for 4, which is Teddy on the other. I own Teddy merchandise. I hate Teddy.
I don't like Teddy very much either. He was okay. That is how I will talk about him.
Teddy gives him some glasses that help him see, and then they're attacked by these creatures by the name of shadows. And they're just, at this point, we don't know what. The group are getting their ass handed to them, and then Protag awakens his persona, Izanagi, and just goes to town. And that's episode 1. Very cool, very fun. We're introduced to everybody. Not a lot happens, but we get the foundation of like, okay, so this is this, like, we're told the premise and we buy into it.
I mean, I feel like him getting his persona in the first episode is pretty big.
It's a lot faster than in the game. You are
like,
it is hours.
That's just like, bam, he's got his persona now. That's what this is. I guess it's just supernatural.
Yeah, I guess this show moves along at a pretty breakneck pace if you like are used to the pacing of the game.
Yeah.
So episode 2 opens with Igor and Margaret giving Protag, you don't see Protag, they're like talking to camera, the contractor's key, which is what helps you get to the Velvet Room. And then they talk to him about his persona a little bit. We get a little bit of flavor text about the Fool Arcana, which in Persona, in addition to having like all of the like starting a journey possibility, infinite possibility type stuff that I'm led to believe its association with tarot is, in the Persona universe, if you have the Fool, you can just like go hog and switch between personas. So in all the Persona games, Protag has the Fool so that you swap around.
And in every Persona game, it's always the same personas?
It's not always the same personas, but you always have that Arcana.
Oh, it's like it's all based on the Arcana. It's just not the same names of personas. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So episode 2 rolls along. Teddy hints that people have been coming into the TV world before. He throws them out back into Juness. There's a joke about Yosuke being a perv because they were like, oh God, we're alive hugging. And then Chie is like, hey, don't take advantage of the situation. I love the transitions between days because it's designed for me to love it. Because every visual thing that you see on the screen is ripped from the game pretty much. So like the question marks, the like despair, like, oh, I don't want to eat this, like, and how time transitions is it's your calendar on your phone going to the next day. And that's how time passes in the games as well. And I popped off so hard.
Oh no,
so hard.
I think it works really well. I mean, I like the way that it just kind of moves the story along because it feels like you are spending a lot of time with these characters and like you are seeing the most important events in their life. You know, it's like you don't have to see them going to school every fucking day. Like it just like it goes to the most important parts of the story, which also is kind of why I feel like it feels like an abbreviated video game, you know, because I'm sure you can play every day, right? So it's like sometimes it just skips like a week, you know, and it's like, yeah, okay, I like this because I know that if I wanted to experience that, I could probably just go to the video game to do that. But like this gets to the point really well.
So the next day they're walking to school. We see a stalker boy being real stalkery in the shadows. He's more stalkery in the show, but he's still pretty stalker in the video game. He's creeping on, at this point we don't know who, but it's implied Yukiko, and it's hard confirmed later Yukiko. The principal in the game is not emotive, but in the show he's just hella chill in the dub. Because he's just like, well, I hate to be the one to tell you guys this, but a student was murdered yesterday. And it's like, you should ease us into that, dude. Or you should like at least sound sad. Like you are telling me this in the same way that I have been told that we are out of bagels. So then they go back into the TV. Saki's dead. By the way, that's what that is. Saki's body is found. They go back into the TV.
Well, isn't this is the one where Yosuke gets his persona finally?
Okay.
Because since he had a crush on her, they like go in there because he wants to save her, and then they encounter his shadow, which is the first time you get introduced to the concept of a person having a shadow.
If I had not been trying to make sense of my notes and we're just thinking about the plot, yeah, that's totally what happens next. But my note was back to TV. TV confrontation. Slightly different. I'm like, well, what? Well, Jack, what does that mean? Yeah, so they're in the TV, and they end up in a shadow version of the shopping district. We find out that Saki's parents own the local liquor store. And so we're like in this weird shadowy version of her parents' store, and we're hearing her voice and the voices of other people. And in the game, it's very clear that she's resentful of having to work at Juness, but she has to work at Juness because her parents' store is going under, and her parents' store is going under in the same way that a lot of stores in the area are going under because Juness is taking too much business. Like, this is a sleepy, smaller town. They're kind of just losing out to it.
They're basically Walmart.
It's Walmart with a food court. So, like, a lot of local businesses are suffering, and, like, we are hearing, like, disembodied voices of other townspeople going, oh, I can't believe she's working for the store that's killing her dad's business, right? And like all of that. And it's a lot like more direct in the game, but it's a little bit hinted at. They actually make it like, they make her self-doubt a little bit more emo-y in the show, in the dub anyway. The line that really hit me was just like, I wish everyone would just die. And it's like, you don't feel that way at all in the game. What's going on, girl? And yeah, and so like we hear that she's only nice to Yosuke because he's the boss's son and she can't really be rude to him. And over the course of that happening, Yosuke's sort of nice guyed his way going into, oh, we've got a date type thing. Nice guy TM, by the way. Yosuke's shadow pops out, a shadow form of Yosuke. Realistically, they're just the same people with yellow eyes.
But they're they represent your inner feelings and like inner doubts and basically your inner conflicts.
Yeah, they're the parts of you that you've been repressing or otherwise been running away from.
Which I really like that as like a character development tool because I really enjoyed the way that you get introduced to these characters and you kind of know them on a surface level, and then in a relatively short manner of time, because of like this being such a like efficient like storytelling tool, like you get to learn a lot about that character and like what they're going through and like what their character's motives are, you know, things like that. I think it works really well from that character development standpoint.
Yeah, and so Yosuke Shadow's like, what are you talking about? You loved blah, 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 blah. You loved the attention. Yeah, blah. And really, Yosuke's like, what he hasn't been dealing with is the fact that he hates being moved out to the boonies. He hates having to leave the big city to be here. He hates the way that people talk about him because, and again, it's not really shown in the anime, but like people do talk about how like he's the son of the guy whose store is ruining the town. They touch on it a little bit here. Yeah, he does resent that. He resents being thought of that way. He resents like not being able to like be a person first because people knew that about him before they met him. And then he says, you're not me to the shadow, and shadows get stronger when you deny them. And so that was like the push that lets his shadow go from being like him with yellow eyes to a frog centaur. It's a dude up top and like a frog body on the bottom, and it's really cool.
I don't remember that, honestly.
So Izanagi and the frog shadow are keeping each other busy. Yosuke spiraling into like this self-doubt depression thing, and Protag just decks him. And it's a very cool moment because in the background, the persona is also decking the centaur horse, and it's very well constructed visually. And then basically Protag goes, okay, cool. Even if everything that you're saying is true, so what? Like, get a hold of yourself. What is this? What is it that you want? Why are you doing this? Right? And like, yeah, Yosuke is able to like get a little bit of like self-awareness and a little bit more on top of himself. The moment's a little bit less impactful, but again, there is less time given to it because they don't have the time. And then that frog centaur becomes a persona, the magician arcana. It goes into a frogman ninja by the name of Jiraiya, which has to mean something because that's the name of the frog sage in Naruto, the pervy sage Jiraiya. He's the toad ninja. I don't know what it means. Anyway, Chie is a lot hungrier in the show. And that's not like a weird, like me getting fancy about like the concept of being thirsty. It's just like she talks about food a little bit more in the show. And don't get me wrong, she talks about food a lot in the game. But yeah, so she's waiting for them outside of the TV. So the original idea when they went back to Junis is to have Protag and Yosuke go in with a rope tied around them and figure out what's going on. But the moment they got through it, the rope cuts. So Chie's just left alone in Junis. So she's there when they come out. She makes Yosuke buy her food in order to make up for abandoning her there. Yosuke and the Protag in the show come across very much like oh my god, they were roommates. Like these two historical figures were roommates. It feels very much more of like there's like a romance thing there, especially in the first couple of episodes, just the way that things are framed and the way that like things are like written. In the game, it's a little bit that way too, but it's in the game, honestly, I just found it annoying because Persona as a franchise has a very bad case of the illusion of choice, where they give you the option to choose between dialogue lines and they don't change the scene. And a lot of times Yosuke's like, yeah, bro, we're partners in this investigation. Or like, yeah, bro, we're best friends. And you don't really have the option to tell him to fuck off. Because then you have no game. But your options are just like agree emphatically or agree not at all.
I do like the way that Narukami like interacts with all of the other characters. I think he has a very like endearing personality, and like he treats everyone very equally, I feel like, which is very nice, you know?
Yeah, as part of being a silent protag in the game, he only really chimes in when you have like those illusion of choice moments in the game. That's when he chimes in the anime as well. But in most cases, the anime gives you the joke option, because like a lot of times it's like agree, disagree, joke option, and the show gives you the joke option every time, which sometimes is really awesome. Other times it makes the protag jump in on some of the pervy comedy moments and is like,
yeah. That's actually really interesting to know.
Yeah. Like a lot of his like little one-liners are joke options. Yeah, episode 3 happens. I guess we haven't talked about it yet, but the intro's a banger.
Oh yeah, I love this intro so much, dude.
Like
both the openings have like one moment in them where I'm just like, oh yeah, this is really good. Like just like the fucking vocal melody kicks in and it's so good.
Yeah, they're very good.
I was very just surprised. I mean, all the music was good.
Persona 4 stans like me got very mad when Persona 5 came out, and people were like, oh my god, it's so stylish. The music is so good. And it's like, yeah, that's a Persona thing. Like, come back and play my game. It's also a good game. But like, Persona 4 has a very different style, but it's very stylistic. It's very good. The intro is done very much in the same style as like the game intro, but it is not the game intro. Like, it is unique to the show, and those songs are also unique to the show, but they're also done very much in the Persona 4 style. And it feels right at home because it is such a stylized game that they're like, boop, we know exactly what to do. Shoutouts to my main man, Lotus Juice. He's one of the artists that are heavily involved in the Persona soundtracks. He is the male voice that does like a lot of the like rhythmic talking / rapping. I love him. He has a really good sense of humor about things as a person, and I hope he hasn't done anything problematic that I did not know about. Yep, that's all I'm going to say about
They also have really good grooves. Like those, I think that's a big thing that made me love them so much, is like they both start out with just this really, really strong, just intriguing groove.
Yeah, no, they are a banger. I love them. Episode 3 kicks off. Margaret and Igor basically tutorialize us on some things. We acquire the Magician's Arcana, which means that Protag gets to swap over to a Magician Arcana, which in the show is Pyro Jack. I don't remember if that's the like actual earliest magician in the game, but I also didn't use magician that much because I did big crit fishing, because that's how you exploit weaknesses for free.
Yeah, I think in the Japanese it's like it's not Jack Lantern. It's like it's a different name. It's not just Pyro Jack. But I can't remember off the top of my head.
What's weird about it? So actually, I was thinking about this. If you know about Persona, you know that the Jacks are like sort of like a franchise mascot.
Well, they're in SMT as well.
Yeah, like they're like the like the Shin Megami Tensei like mascot character. But they're not featured like that much in the anime, which I'm honestly pretty surprised.
I mean, he does summon King Frost at one point.
Yeah, he does, but like that's it.
I mean, yeah, I think that's fine because I feel like they, to me, are more of an SMT thing. So, like, it's cool to have those little hints because if you don't know, the Persona series is a spin-off of, like, Shin Megami Tensei, which is an older Japanese RPG series.
They're hard as balls.
I guess I don't know what started the Persona spin-offs, but they use a lot of monsters and demons from the SMT series as personas.
Yeah, the SMT series is just focused on like the strategy game aspect, like a strategy game to get you to a story, or a story to get you through the strategy game, I suppose, depending on how you want to look at it. And then it's not really until like Persona 3 where like the slice of life school simulator dating sim gets added. Episode 3, after the tutorial and the intro, we open up on like a flashback moment of a child Yukiko and a child Chie, and you pretty much get to see how they meet. I don't remember having this moment in the game because I remember going, oh, this is very nice. Yukiko's crying because she has this puppy that her parents will not let her keep, and Chie's just like making a fool out of herself to stop her from crying, and then Chie takes the puppy home. We actually get to see a big old picture of the big old boy later on, as it's a very good moment. That night, they see Yukiko on the Midnight Channel. We are also introduced in this episode to the social link for the Sport Boys. In the game, so they are both the Strength Arcana, but in the game you choose one. You either choose Daisuke with soccer, or you choose Ichijo with basketball. And then both of them unlock the next social link, which I don't remember if she's introduced. I don't remember if she's introduced in this episode or the next episode, but she's the other social link. She's the one that like is weirder in the show because you don't have as much time with her. We'll get to that in a second.
Does Chie get her persona at the same time as Yukiko? I can't remember.
So she gets it in the same dungeon. In the game, they're a little... So she gets it at the mini boss, and then...
Oh, yeah.
And then that, but like in the show, it's the same. It's pretty close to the same episode. Yeah, not too terribly much happens in this episode. We watch our cousin sister Nanako doing chores around the house. Yosuke's like, "Hey, dude, I found these things that'll help us in the shadow world," and he just has these two big ass swords in the middle of the Junes food court, which then gets y'all put in the car.
Yeah, they literally just get arrested. Just like...
In the game, this is like the first moment where there's like a little bit of conflict between you and Dojima, because Dojima is a police detective, and he's like, "Hey, I don't know what you did in the big city, but we can't be having this sort of behavior here, not in my house."
And I love how Narukami literally didn't even do anything. He was just there, and since crap, I forgot his name. Yosuke. For some reason, I wanted to say Yojima.
Yojima! What's up?
Yosuke is just swinging these swords around, and then he kind of gets like tagged in with it.
One thing that I really like about Persona in both the game and the anime is that the characters don't have that many pairs of clothes, but they do have different seasonal outfits. So quick shout outs to everybody's spring outfits.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have stylish outfits for being students. I've always wondered if that's like actually something that Japanese students are allowed to do, where they kind of like add on their own altercations to the normal school uniform.
I'm assuming not, because that defeats the point of a uniform.
Well, exactly, and it's like people like Kanji, who we haven't even been introduced to yet.
Homie just doesn't wear his school top.
Yeah, he just wears like some shirt with like a skull and crossbones on it under his school jacket. It's like, I don't know if you could get away with that. But that's also something that happens in JoJo's. So
yeah, so they go back to the television world to try to figure out what's going on with Yukiko. They've like already at this point established that people who are in the TV world appear on this show called the Midnight Channel, which is this thing that happens that's the shadow of some person who's in the TV world already, broadcast like they're on a TV show. So they go back. We get a little bit of lore about the glasses. Teddy makes glasses for the protags. That just helps them see through the fog. They're sort of running. So Yukiko's shadows, like little Midnight Channel blurb, is about sort of like this weird dating show where Princess Yukiko is looking for a prince. She's going to hunt her a stud, which is the start of the worst reoccurring joke in the show and in the game, where horny ass Teddy goes, well, am I still in the running for stud hunting for like the rest of the goddamn franchise? Yeah, they're sort of running through this palace, and then Chie ends up running ahead. We get this really cool black and white scene where Chie's sort of like in Yukiko's room at the inn by herself because she's run ahead of the guys. We don't get this in the game, and it's honestly like a really cool like moment, but this is where like Chie like starts hearing like Yukiko's doubts and Yukiko's thoughts. It's very well done. Chie, we hear that like Yukiko's self-doubt is jealous of Chie, has a sort of Prince Charming dynamic. It's not in the dungeon, but it is very cool. Chie is sort of like, ooh, what? And it's like, she's like starting to question her like relationship with Yukiko and like their codependency, and like if they haven't, like all of this gets thrown into question, which then summons a Chie shadow to come in, and it's like, oh, come on, you're so jealous of Yukiko. She's prettier than you, she's more popular than you, like you love the fact that she needs you around because she doesn't have self-confidence. You prey off the fact that she isn't secure in herself. And Chie says the magical words, which just denies them. Shadow Chie evolves into Shadowy Chie, which is a dominatrix banana. It's a dominatrix banana with a big old, like, it's a bad look. In the game, she's on like this throne of like faceless shadows that are being dominated, and it's really weird, and I'm glad that that's not how it was in, at the very least, it's not like blatantly obvious in the show.
They defeat it. Doesn't you just punch it?
No. I don't believe so. It's like it takes both Jiraiya and Uzanagi like to come at it. Chie's awakening is very cool, is cooler here than in the game. She achieves like a level of self-awareness that like she doesn't really get until later. And she summons her persona by doing a spin kick. Hell yeah. Chie's the dumb fight girl. She's like the tomboy character. She's really into kung fu movies. She's taught herself kung fu. She's not that dumb in the show. In the game, one of her like character traits that they just don't have time to show in this show is that she's just sort of dumb. She and Yosuke are the two that will fail every test and just like say stupid things. But yeah, it's a good example of what I was saying earlier, where because they don't have time to show everything, some characters get better. Like, it's not a very endearing or very relevant part of Chie's character, but in the show, it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot of good balance, because I don't think she's shown to be necessarily unintelligent, but she's just kind of like does stupid things sometimes. And there's multiple occasions where she like says something. She's like, oh, is this what's going on? And then everyone's like, oh, you just figured it out. You know, she's like, oh, I did? Like, I don't know. Moments like that are really good. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the character development. Because, like, honestly, I think that's one of the reasons I liked this show so much and could, like, keep watching it, was because you get introduced to these internal aspects of characters so quickly that, like, a lot of media just, like, doesn't do a very good job. And it's, like, interesting, because I feel like the only reason it works that way is because they work it into a mechanic from the game, you know, and like in the show it serves like a really good purpose, you know.
Yeah, so how they defeat Shadow Chie is, and I honestly really don't like this moment in the show because it's a little lame. Margaret just starts talking. It's like, hey, you know what your power to like switch things is? Oh, like she specifically uses the phrase, oh, chosen one. And it's like, that doesn't sound like Margaret at all. What's going on here, dub? He changes into Pyrojack in that moment and exploits elemental weakness, and then you get a nice all-out attack. Like I said earlier, most of like the visual effects are straight from the game. So in the game, when you exploit the weakness of something, it gets knocked down, and you get a one more, so you get to attack again before passing up the initiative. And if every opponent in a combat is knocked down, then you get to do an all-out attack, which is it just all of your dudes goon in for like this little cutscene, and you do some AoE damage. And every time that you do it, you get like their face cut in, and you get one of those cut-ins here. And I popped super hard. It's very much a for the fans thing. Chie gets her persona here, and while they're like recuperating, she shows you a picture on her phone of the dog. And like, he's just a good he's a big old good old boy, and I love him. We go to episode 4. We are in the Velvet Room. Some, non-important stuff happens there. Chie summons the chariot, which is fine. We get a nice joke moment that ends up being pretty reoccurring, where Teddy gives Chie like the Japanese equivalent of Groucho Marx glasses rather than like real glasses that like the other ones have.
Oh, well, that's a pretty funny running joke.
And we establish the relationship between Yosuke and Teddy. It's not particularly well done, but again, they don't have that much time to deal with it. I'm very much just like, hey, shut up, bear. You're being obnoxious. We get a little bit of Princess Yukiko. We get a cut-in and a flashback to Chie stopping some creeps from going like hard on being creepy towards Yukiko. Yukiko thanks her, and Chie goes, oh, it's nothing. I just stormed your castle, milady. And this introduces my least favorite aspect of Yukiko, because sometimes it feels very good, other times it's just weird. Yukiko gets the giggles, and this is the first time that we see getting the giggles, because she's like, I don't know if that's what you meant to say, Chie. That's hang on a second, Chie. Yeah, it also sort of establishes that like knight and princess imagery a little bit more. We get a cut back to Yukiko saving this bird, working at her family's inn. There's this like bird in a gilded cage motif with her. It's a very beautiful bird. Yeah, we hear a little bit about Yukiko's shadows being like, I want to live anywhere but here.
Because she's very like just distraught with, having to work at her family's inn, and that's like her life, and she doesn't want that, but that's her character arc kind of.
It's touched on a little bit in the show, but in the game it's very well established that Yukiko's family's inn is the like most prominent historical inn in the region. Like if her family's inn wasn't there, the town would go under, is like what they talk about in the game. And so Yukiko, being the only child, she's been like from a very young age and like, yeah, like the reality is that you're going to be running this. And like Yukiko's whole arc is that she learns to like, okay, so
she learns to accept that.
Going back and forth. In the show, you don't get all of it, but her full arc is giving herself permission to disappoint her family in order to do what makes herself happy, which is literally anything else. And then by the end of it, she's like, well, actually, I really do like the people here. I like the friends and relationships that I made here, and I think I would be happy doing this. It's very much a moment of her choosing to do it because she wants to do it versus having to do it because it's being forced on her. That's her like series arc.
I mean, we see that in the anime.
She tells us the very end of it at the end, but like the like journey in the middle, we don't get the like, I'm going to rebel, I'm going to give myself permission to do other things. We don't get that. We go back to her boss fight. I have a very awkward moment here where I had to think to myself, does her shadow's bird have as large titties in the game, or is this just a really awkward angle? Because her shadow is this like phoenix thing that's like, it's like a phoenix harpy, and it's got some big old boobies, except it doesn't. But like the first time that you see it is like from like a bottom up perspective, and it's like that. I don't know why, but these just seem like massive boobs right now. Her whole conversation with her shadow is just basically her shadow going, I'm weak. It's that like initial like weakness, disappointing people, like I can never leave, I can never escape type things. I always need people like Chie to do things for me, that sort of like. We get a very cool moment of Chie literally walking through fire as like the shadows just like bombarding the area, and like gives this like really good speech about like mutual jealousy and about how like their friendship means more to her like regardless, even though she's like come to accept her jealousy. It's honestly it's a very good scene, and it was very well framed. She sort of brings up the fact that they're like mutually dependent also, which is like good self-awareness. Yukiko's awakening is much cooler in the anime.
Coolier.
Once more. Coolier. There's a very quote-unquote not gay embrace. And the only reason I bring that up is a big thing that the show tackles is like accepting your sexual and gender identity. We'll get to those characters later, but Chie and Yukiko also very much have like a they're totally gay type thing going on, except it's not like a part of them. They're canonically they're both heterosexual women, but like their relationship and like a lot of the imagery with them is like, just kiss, just do it.
But I think this show
There's
is
this scene of like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, this show is good with bridging some of those gaps, with like having these relationships be deep without having to go to a romantic setting.
Yeah, but so the scene in like the bit in particular, I'm like, this deserves to just like be like they gay, is as they defeat the shadow. Yukiko's in this like bird cage that the shadow is holding on to, and she literally falls into like this very soft, loving hug with Chie. And yes, it's still a strong relationship without them being romantically interested in each other, but it's like, you guys deserve, honestly, partially because there's just like no better characters with which to ship them in the show. It's like, and also they're cute together. Also, so the game, depending on what your party composition is, will give you like opportunities to do specific 2-people attacks. And the pairs of people are Kanji and Naoto, Yosuke and Teddy. Or not Yosuke. Yeah, Yosuke. Yeah, Yosuke. Persona 5 also has Yusuke.
What the fuck?
So Persona 4 and Persona 5 basically share a name, and I always get them confused. Yosuke and Teddy have like a team attack, and then Chie and Yukiko have a team attack, which is also another reason I'm just like, let them kiss. Yeah, and then episode 5 happens. So, episode 5 happens, and we are going to acquire the Moon and the Strength Arcana. So while they wait for Yukiko to get better, Yu is asked by Chie to help out with a basketball club that's ran by one of the sports boys that we saw earlier. He's formally introduced to Ichijo, who's the captain of the basketball team, and basically they don't have the membership to keep the team open. He also meets the team's manager, Ai Abihara. They do a little bit of a practice. They eventually find out Ai has a crush on Ichijo and asks for his help. There's a very awful scene where as they're picking up after club, Protag asks Ichijo, like, hey, do you have a crush on anybody? And he's like, yeah, I have a crush on Chie. And now that you know, you got to help a brother out. Turns out in the crate that they thought were chairs that he was putting back into the supply closet was I. So I's just sitting there hearing him have a crush on somebody else.
Well, because she asked you specifically to bring it up.
Right, but what we did not know as the audience at that point is that she was hiding in the crate for the conversation.
She's just very sad.
And then this is where like the weird suicidal ideation / like emotional manipulation comes in. It's not well done in the game, but it's better in the game. At this point, I goes to throw herself off the school, like off the top of the roof. Yu manages to stop her, and then I kind of forces him into dating her until she finds somebody else. It's a very weird moment, because basically she's like, yeah, and if you don't do it, I'll kill myself. Big yikes. A big yikes. Yeah, there's just no universe wherein that's a good scene.
Well, isn't that's pretty much the whole episode? Yeah, because then they just kind of go on a fling. Like, she's like, yeah, let's just start skipping class. And then, like, she starts taking him away from Chie and Yosuke and Yukiko. And then, doesn't she basically... Well, then, is that in the same episode where Chie then joins... Yu gets Chie to join the like manager team for the basketball like team because he knows that what's his face has a crush on Chie, and then Chie does join, but they hate each other. Ebihara and Chie, they hate each other, so then like they get angry at each other, and ultimately it ends with Ebihara, realizing her faults and being like, I'm sorry that I like just kind of threw myself on you and was like very manipulative.
Yeah. So regardless of if it happens in this episode, yeah, that's more or less her whole arc. Yosuke volunteers Chie to help out in the sports ball, and then she's helping film an episode or like their next game. We learn that Ichijo's planning on quitting basketball after the next game because his parents don't like him like giving up so much time to it. They go and do the game, but while the game's happening, Ai confronts Chie because of her jealousy, and like there's honestly a very well composed scene where it's like a hard cut of like intense basketball to like Ai slapping Chie, and then cut to basketball, and then Chie slapping Ai, and like they're like having that fight there. And honestly, this like 30 seconds isn't great because it's two female characters fighting over a boy, but it is kind of the second best basketball anime I've ever seen. Like the actual basketball bits of it are pretty good.
Hey, well, I've always heard Slam Dunk is really good.
Yeah, that's like more or less the main arc of that.
And that's all one episode, right?
Yeah.
Or is that 2 episodes?
Yeah. It's not a great arc in general, but condensing it so much makes it worse. Because it's like, yeah, this is just fight about a boy. I'm okay not being accepted by a boy. We find out that Ai's like motivation, like, and like the reason why so much of her self-worth is put on whether or not Ichijo likes her is that she used to be very viciously bullied for being a fat kid. In the game, we kind of get a little bit more about like how like vitriolic it is, but like she brings it up in that like hey, date me or I'm going to kill myself moment. They lose that game though, and like afterwards they're like getting like celebratory food or like post game food, I suppose, because they did lose. And Protake's like, hey, dude, I'm sorry that we lost your last game. And he's like, nah, that's not going to be the last one. I decided that I'm staying with it anyway. Fuck my parents. I can't go out on a loss. Uncle Dad brings home Adachi, who's this like new junior detective on the force, home to have dinner with his family. He starts getting way too sherry about case details, and so gets absolutely slugged by Dojima. Very fun. I enjoy that quite a bit. This episode also introduces us to Noodle Girl.
Oh yeah, she's great.
She is a fan favorite who's not at all important.
I mean, yeah, she's hardly even a character.
She's so much more of a character in the show, though.
Oh, in the show?
She's so much of a fan favorite that they just like wrote her into more places in the show.
I thought she was cute. Like she was just kind of there. Like she's kind of a gag character because she's like always delivering to them like wherever they are. Like because she works for a restaurant that has like a constant delivery service no matter where in town you are. Like you don't have to be at a physical address. She'll just bring it to you, which I thought was super funny.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all that happens in that episode. I forget that we have both. So social links, which are like these arcana relationships, they have 10 large moments in them. Like there are 10 story moments in them in the game. And the show gives you the startup and then like the 10th one. So it's like the startup and then the conclusion of it. And so I kind of forget that we get both of theirs in the same episode. A lot happens. None of it's important, but a lot happens. Yukiko makes her recovery. So I guess we didn't talk about it. When you're in like the shadow world in that way, it's incredibly physically demanding. So after every time that people are in there, they need some time to recuperate. Yukiko makes her recovery and she's like, I need to join you in figuring this out. So she becomes part of the investigation team. Episode 6 happens. Margaret is alone in the Velvet Room. She's like, hey, way to go. Good job. This is really just there for people who've played the games because there are moments where you're talking where like Igor's just not there. Because Margaret's also a social link that you can progress. In fact, she's like one of the few that you canonically hard confirm kiss in your social link.
Wait,
and
really?
In everybody else's like romance bits, it's like a fade to black. And so there is that like little bit of nobody kisses in my Christian server. But Margaret's like a hard confirm kiss.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so Golden Week is coming up, and Dojima makes plans with Nanako, but he has to pull out because of work. We are introduced that this happens a lot, just in his profession. Yu takes Nanako with him to hang out with his friends at Juness, and they are all good people about it. No one's an asshole like, oh, you brought yours, but like they are all just like super awesome and like super here for being like kind to Nanako.
Yeah, I love Nanako's relationship with all of them. I like that they are like that, I don't know. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's wholesome.
We're introduced in this episode to Kanji Tatsumi. Kanji's the best character in almost any anime. Like, I think he may just be the best character in fiction, in any way, shape, or form. I love him. I love my big gay son. So he ends up on the Midnight Channel. He was on TV in the news the day prior, like resisting arrest. We find out that he beat the shit out of a motorcycle gang because all of their motorcycle ganging was keeping his mom up at night. And he just didn't want his mom to not be able to sleep. So he beats up an entire ass gang because he's a good boy.
Yeah. And then, like, they talk about how he's, like, the leader of all the bike gangs now. And he's like, no, I'm not in the bike gangs.
Yeah, the rumor is he beat them up, and now they're his king. Now he's their king.
I actually, like, love his Japanese voice acting. It's really, really good.
Without looking it up, I'm pretty certain that Kanji's voiced by Matt Mercer, but I don't know. I'm almost certain it's Matt Mercer. He shows up on the Midnight Channel that night. This is where the show starts its exploration of accepting your gender identity. It's not great about it in his shadow, because his shadow is very much like a stereotypical horny pervert gay guy. Like,
yeah,
it's not great for his shadow. He has a character. Sorry, go ahead.
I was pretty, like, skeptical of, like, where his character was going at first, because I was like, this is a really weird depiction. I hope that, like, this doesn't, you know, like, signify the way that they're going to treat, like, a non-straight character from here on out, you know?
Yeah, and thankfully it's not. But yeah, his shadow is in, again, the Midnight Channel is this weird show. He's in this, like, bathhouse talking about getting hot and steamy, about getting his blood pumping, and he's wearing just his, like, little, like, modesty towel, and it's like, this isn't how we do this game. The show is better about, like, the actual conversation around it. So they see him on the Midnight Channel, and then they're just like, well, that doesn't seem right. Kanji isn't female, because at this point they're thinking, oh, it's women victims. They go by his family's shop just to talk to his mom about things, and they find, like, the same scarf that was, like, made as, like, into the noose that they found in the television world. As they leave, they see Kanji talk with what we will know as Naoto / because of the intro, you know, to be Naoto. Naoto's just like, hey, come hang out with me tomorrow and let me ask you questions. The next day after school, they split into teams to, like, sneak up and, like, figure out what's going on. Yosuke and Chie, like, start following Kanji as he meets up with Naoto, and then you and, like, Protag and Yukiko hang out near the shop. Yukiko starts talking about her social link stuff, which is like, yeah, it's my destiny to, like, run this in, but it feels weird. Yosuke and Chie goof up. Chie panics and is like, hey, it's free love, man. You can be gay, nobody minds. And Kanji's like, hang on, what the fuck is going on here? Because, like, Kanji's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? Like, what's happening here? And they're like, no, we're not. It's okay if gay. And, like, Kanji's like, hang on, what's happening? And he does it in a very, like, loud and angry way, but he's just a loud and angry boy. He threatens to beat him up. They run away, and then we get, like, honestly a pretty solid chase scene where it's Kanji chasing the entire crew because Yosuke and Chie like meet up with Protag and Yukiko.
Yeah, and they're like, run.
They're all running, but before this, Chie had ordered lunch from the delivery girl, and so she just shows up on her moped as they're running, and they do, like, there's a complete, like, Chie's, like, making change, and, like, Yukiko's pulling out her coin purse, like, while they're running from Kanji. It's honestly pretty good. That night, they watch the Midnight Channel. Overly flamboyant Kanji is there, and Yosuke calls him up as soon as it gets done broadcasting to be homophobic about it.
Yosuke was he homophobic about it though? I feel like in that moment he's just like, did you see that?
He's
like it's not in, like, a great way, but it gets more.
It's
homophobic
not the
later,
worst homophobic that he will be about it, but it's still not homophobic. He's more homophobic in general in the game, just because, like, that interaction happens more. Yeah, it's real awkward. I'm going to take 30 seconds to see if my notes say anything about this.
I mean, I do like the way that Kanji is ultimately represented, and I think I would honestly almost go as far to say as Kanji is kind of bisexual. Like, that's kind of the framing that I felt like I got from it, because he specifically has a line later down the line that, like, where he says, I don't care if it's men or women, I just like cute shit. And I love that line.
Kanji is not bad representation. Kanji is very powerful representation. And Forrest, you have stumbled onto... I do not engage much with the Persona community because it's weird, even being a very, very, very big Persona fan. But you have stumbled upon a very large point of discussion within the Persona community. And it boils down to Kanji can't be gay. He's into Naoto. And Kanji has to be gay because he's into Naoto. Kanji's not like really hard confirmed, but it is like heavily. It's like, yeah, he's finds people attractive and that's it. But the show doesn't talk about it, but the game talks about the fact that he is like this like macho delinquent kid, not only because like the show points out that he gets made fun of for liking cute things and like being able to like knit and like all of these traditionally feminine activities. Not only is that something that he's like gets bullied for, but also his dad left when he was a kid, and so he's always had like a very complicated understanding of what is and is not masculinity and what is and what it does and does not mean to be a man. I was honestly a little upset that they didn't touch on it in the show, because that's like one of the bits about him that's like, I really like how he's like not denying these like softer sides of himself, but he's still in that questioning, like, well, what is my masculinity? I think that was like a very cool moment of his journey. It's still done well in the show, but I would have liked that little bit, just that little bit more. Episode 7 happens in the Velvet Room. Margaret's like, oh, you did the thing. And then they get the Priestess Arcana, which is Yukiko's Arcana.
I guess we didn't even touch on exactly what happened when they went to rescue Kanji.
They don't rescue him there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they see him on the Midnight Channel the first night. They don't know that it's him. Yeah. We just started jumping to the fact that the next time we see his shadow, it's very, very bad, or like a bad stereotype. They see him on the Midnight Channel as like this hazy figure, and then the next night they see the overly flamboyant one. That's after all of the chasing. So the next time, then we're going in to save him in this episode. So yeah, the four go back to rescue Kanji, and they can't find him. We find out that Kanji made this little like bunny-shaped charm for a kid who had broken like one of his friends, and so they give that to Teddy to have him like track down the scent, who finds Kanji in a bathhouse, which... It's a fun dungeon. There's a big old semen joke in the show that's very awkward. Yeah, when they're in there, he's just straight up like strapping, like he is bullying his shadow, and he's like, "Hey, shut the fuck up. What are you saying? Hang on. What conversation are we having here?" Like from the get-go, Kanji is more self-aware than anybody else about their shadow. He's like, "Yeah, okay, cool. Hang on. What's happening here?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not gay." And so like he pinning his shadow to the ground when the crew comes in and they're like, I didn't want to, and like gay jokes.
Yeah, I know.
Happen. And then he's just like, no, I'm not, like, calm down. Like, and so he denies his shadow for being a pussy, not even for not being gay, but just for being like a real scaredy boy. And then his shadow transforms into something that is very well designed from an imagery standpoint. It's this big, giant muscle man with like body hair of flowers starting from his happy trail. But instead of a head, it's that naked shadow Kanji popping out of a flower vagina in the middle of the chest that has like two weights on either arm that are the masculine symbols. As a piece of visual imagery, it is very on the nose, but it is very coherent. There are two ads in this fight that are big, muscly men, and they're a pain in the actual fight. In the show, they're rapey.
Yeah.
And it's very
weird.
Unfortunate. They go about slapping Protag and Yusuke's ass, and it's really awkward, and they're like real subby.
Yeah, well, in Japanese, they have a very particular like mood about them that I've seen far too many times in anime. Yeah. They kind of moan a lot, and it's very awkward.
Yeah, they don't outrightly moan in the dub, but they do go, oh, like it's not like, but like it's not great.
10 times worse in the Japanese.
Kanji's shadow is just kicking their ass until Yu gets to do a video game concept, which is he fuses two of his other personas together, which is fun. He just fuses it into a stronger persona, which is a key like gameplay loop. And then Yu's like, hey, Kanji, this is yours. And he's basically like, hey, Kanji, what's up? Everybody else is having this like deep moment, and Yu just sort of accepts things at face value. And so he's like, yeah, dude, this shit's cute. And then Kanji's like, oh, wow, no one's ever called my things cute before without making fun of me for making a cute thing. Which is then like his like, all right, I'm going to go punch my shadow right now. And then he does. He straight up man modes. Like nobody else has direct physical confrontation with their shadow. Kanji, as a dude, just walks up and gut punches it.
Yeah.
And then when it's like weakened, he's like, hey, dude, we are us.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I'm not gay. I just don't like being rejected by anyone. He's like, men, women, I don't like when people don't accept me. And then he gets his persona, which is this big jacked up skeleton man with a lightning bolt club.
He's pretty dope.
Yeah. We just sort of time skip to when Kanji joins up with the crew. Dojima asks Protag if he has been getting involved with anything weird because he saw Protag at the shop that Kanji's mom runs. Very good episode, with the exception, like big asterisk. Like it's a very, we could save this for like a discussion of like characters in general, but it is a very good example of Kanji being very strong representation and very well presented, but also this being a quote unquote comedy, and so relying on some pretty egregious stereotypes. You take the good, you take the bad.
I think that's all there is to be said about it.
Episode 8 happens. It's the school camping trip. There's a comedy scene about the girls not being able to cook. There's a very unfortunate 2008 comedy representation of a fat chick.
Yeah.
They meet up with Saki's little brother, who's a social link in his own right. He's the one that's the most like a chore to get in the game because he doesn't have that much as a character apart from I'm learning how to be myself and deal with everybody feeling bad for me now.
I just also like Narukami going around and just making people's lives better. Because he kind of does. I mean, like, they invite him to, like, hang out with them because, like, initially he hates them. And then, like, I don't know. It's just...
He doesn't have much of an arc in the game either, but this is one of those. That means that when they condense it down to the show, he has no arc. Like,
I mean, I feel like his arc is literally like, oh, I hate you guys. Oh, you guys are actually nice. Thank you.
Yeah. That's all that you see in the show. And honestly, there's not much more to it in the game. We get a homophobic comedy scene where Yosuke's uncomfortable with Kanji sleeping in their tent.
And Yu's just kind of going along with it for whatever reason.
Well, because you just... Like I said earlier, because Protag is a silent protagonist, and since the game is the illusion of choice, in this scene, Yosuke is homophobic for comedic reasons to then cause the next comedy scene. Comedic and big asterisk. Which means no matter what option you have, you can't circumvent that. So the comedy answer is to also be uncomfortable with it. And basically, Kanji goes, all right, if you guys are going to know, or it... In the English, he says something like, well, I'm going to go hang out with the girls because at least they have more balls than you. And so he goes to the girls' tent and they beat the shit out of him because what the fuck are you doing in our tent? And then the girls show up back into Yu and Yosuke's tent, and then that's just awkward. Yosuke gets a little pervy, but like... On the last day of camping, Yosuke convinces the girls to go swimming. They are not into it. And let me be perfectly clear, there is no redeeming this scene because they are not into it in any way, shape, or form. And they are not comfortable with it. But Yosuke, like, guilts them into doing it because they had, like, the girls were in charge of making the food and they just made such shitty food that none of them ate that day.
Yeah.
And so Yosuke pressures them into it and they're like, oh, but we didn't bring bathing suits, haha. And Yosuke had previously purchased them bathing suits. Not great.
In their character color schemes.
And then Yosuke is pervy about it, and because you're choosing comedy answer for the show, you are also a little pervy about it, which then gives Chie ample reason to drop kick you off a waterfall, which is pretty rad. And then Kanji gets knocked in as well.
I love how Kanji's just kind of there, and then he's just like, so what now? And then they just kick him too.
He has like one of those like nosebleed. Like he isn't being a perv about it, but he's like getting one of those like horny nosebleeds. There's another unfortunate comedy scene with the fat chick. It's not great.
That was like the end of the episode because Kanji ended up sleeping next to her, and then she walks up to him blushing, and she's like, "You're not my type."
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm fine with that. Like, I thought that was actually a pretty good way to do it.
She gets like a really cool like moment of like, you're not my type. But like the entire setup is like the crew watches her walking up, like, oh, she's gonna go confess her love. Ha, Kanji, you're gonna have love confessed to you by the fat girl. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
And then like that part's not great. But then she's like, you're not my type. Just forget about me.
And then Kanji just screams. He's just like, what was that? And then he just like
very confused.
I don't know, that actually made me laugh.
Episode 9 introduces us to Rize. It's Rize Kujikawa, the teen idol known as Rosette. She's taking a break from her career and is helping out at her family's tofu shop in Inaba. While she's shopping at Junes, we get like this like stalker scene set up where like she's running away from somebody who we only see like their like pants and like their feet. And then she gets to the elevator and it's Protag.
Oh,
and he's just like, oh, hey, you dropped your phone. And then he leaves. And she's like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
I did actually really like the framing of that, because then it's just him and he's just like so awkward. He's just like, you dropped this. And she's like, why didn't you say something? Instead you were just following me.
That's fair. And he also goes, oh, I'm sorry about that. I'll do that better next time.
Yeah.
And like he's like, you know what? My bad. In the game, your whole dynamic with Rize as the protagonist is you are the only person who treats her like a person.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't treat her like a sex object like all of the other males in the game, with the exception of Kanji do, and you don't treat her like this, like, skank or like this, like, being jealous of her like most of the female characters do. And so she's, like, hardcore crushing on Protag in the game. It happens a little bit in the show, but, like, it's, like, overt in the game. As far as the show's concerned, she's just sort of around. That night, she's on the midnight. Okay, so we watch a like water commercial that she's in that's far less horny than it was in the game, and I was like, oh wow, nice. And then we get her midnight channel, which is far more horny than it was in the game, and so it's like, okay, okay.
Yeah, and they even like bring it up too, because she's like, no, that wasn't me, because I don't have boobs that size.
Yeah.
And that was just like weird. Okay. And then of course it does end up being her.
Well, and then also, of course, it prompts Yosuke to be like, oh, you're right, and like stare at her tits some more. And it's like, god damn it. Yeah. And so they're like, well, she's the next one to get kidnapped, so they like kind of stalk out her place to like catch a stalker, and they run, and like they end up running down like a super fan that's like stalking her. The next day, Rize goes to school at their high school. Main character runs into her as they're about to leave, and there's just like a bunch of paparazzi outside, so they hop a fence and have like her, like the episode 1 of her social link. Yeah, and she was just like, yeah, I was kind of done with like all of this. And then her old agent pops up and is like, hey, that movie role is being given to your rival. Also, I am going to go manage her now. Goodbye. And then that night is the pervy midnight channel. The one before is obviously her, but in a bikini without much happening. And then the next one's like tits, ass, boom, pow. I'm going to bear it all, like stripper, like intro. And it's like, she is 16. She is a freshman.
Well, and it's funny how, like, in that moment with Yu Narukami, when her manager shows up, he's like, are you sure you're not, like, thinking this through completely? And she's like, no, you don't even know me either. And then she's just
and
like,
in her defense, you don't know her.
Well, no, I get that. But, like, it's funny just because I feel like right before that, she was, like, getting really into, like, how Yu, like, just treats her like a normal person, and then she kind of just flips her shit on him all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, it's one, her story especially gets, like, done a little bit dirty by being so condensed. Because her entire arc is she goes from leaving the idol business because she doesn't like being forced to be someone that she's not. And then over the course of her social link, she's like, well, actually, this like being a member of show business is part of me and it's a part that I like, but there's a way that I can do it while being true to myself. And like we get like the tail end of that in the show, but it is like pretty hastily done. Episode 10 happens. They go into a strip club dungeon where her shadow is. Rize's being like harassed by like multiple different versions of her from like different roles. And then they turn into one giant psychedelic stripper lady. They do some persona battles. We're introduced to the concept of like Rize being like the analyst shadow, and like we see her shadow scanning people and then shooting them with a big old laser that she shoots out of the stripper pole, which is honestly pretty cool. Yeah, and then they sort of just do like your run-of-the-mill persona bit. She's like, well, yeah, none of you are me, but you're all also me. I am more than that, but you are also part of me, like that sort of thing. Teddy gets his shadow in this episode as well, because Rize's whole thing is like, I don't know who I am, and like that's like her like big shadow confrontation. And Teddy's like, I also don't know who I am, because I was just in this world, and I'm not a person, and y'all are jealous. What is this? And so Teddy also gets a shadow here, but Rize, because her persona is also like the analyzing persona, she like starts scanning for the weakness, and she's how they beat Teddy's persona. What's actually really fun is when we watch her scan, it pulls up the same UI that you get in game when you're like pulling up stats using Rize. Very fun.
I mean, like, that whole segment with Teddy, honestly, was kind of creepy to me. Like, the eyes on that giant thing.
Teddy's persona is very creepy. Very, like, worn down, giant animatronic.
Yeah.
Just cracking. Oh, yeah, it's very creepy.
And he, like, gets sucked into it.
Yeah, it has a little bit of an existential crisis. Yeah, and then Teddy gets his persona. It's really weird because it happens pretty much just as quickly in the game as well, but it's like, oh, okay, fine. I guess Teddy has these moments. The next episode, they find out that King Moron, their homeroom teacher, has been murdered. It's weird because he wasn't on TV. He wasn't set up like the other ones were. So they're just like, well, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, because up to this point, they thought they were kind of getting a sense for like the routine of the murderer, the MO of the murderer, I guess. Because like so far, everyone that had been kidnapped and sent to the TV world had shown up on television prior, in the real world. That was like a consistent thing, and then this throws a whole wrench in everything, kind of leading into the end of like the first season / first half of the season.
Yeah, and then in this episode, Teddy so Teddy shows up at Junis while they're talking about their nonsense, and he just like rips off his head, and there's a little anime boy inside of there, and Teddy had so aggressively wanted to be someone that he materialized a human body.
Yeah, that was... God, I just hate his design in his human form. I don't know why, but it's just so annoying.
Teddy's always annoying. I don't know why. It's just the human form.
I mean, it's made worse by his voice, because like his voice is fine in Japanese because he's like a weird creature. But then like when he turns into an anime boy, he keeps the same annoying voice that's like really just like squeaky and raspy, and like it's just so annoying to see him on screen at all times.
For the rest of the episode, the gang's going to check in on Rize. They run into Naoto, who just like, hey, you guys are connected to these murders. I don't know how, but you are. They talk to Rize. She joins the crew. The next day they go to school, and they have a new homeroom teacher, which is flirtatious woman. Thankfully, she's a much smaller role in the TV show. In the game, she's also just as bad, though. She's worse because you see her more often. And her whole thing is she's old enough to start losing self-confidence, so she brings up how hot she is. And there's like, yeah, it's awkward. And then Yukiko gets stalked by the stalker boy again. And then we see him get rejected, and he goes home and otakus it up. He then takes credit for the murders that have happened in an online chat room, and the chat room's just like, no, you didn't. Like, shut up, dude. So then he turns himself over to the police in order to like be like a copycat, like taking credit for the killing. Nobody like feels like he's the one who did it. Like even from the get-go, the crew's like, I don't think it's him. He's on the Midnight Channel going Catch Me If You Can. Next episode, we've grabbed Teddy's Arcana. The gang heads into the TV where they find the otaku in like a JRPG like dungeon. It's a very cool dungeon. And then by the time they get to him, he's arguing with his shadow over the murders, while his other self is like, while the shadow talks about how they're empty, how they just like don't have anything inside of them, he refuses it, and like that's why his shadow transforms. And then his shadow is this weird baby inside of this Lego block JRPG 8-bit warrior.
But I think this is the episode. I literally wrote a note down about this because I was like, that was so incredibly confusing. This is the episode where like they go to find him, and then it just like hard cuts to like the future, and they're all like going their separate paths and whatnot. Like at first I was like, that cut was so abrupt that I'm not sure if this is right or not. So I like literally went back and forth like, is this supposed to be happening? And then I wrote it out, and then like they just get to the fight, and they were like already in the middle of the fight, and I was like, what?
So what it is, how it actually happens is they show up and his shadow transforms. We don't see the fight. His shadow transforms, and then boom, it's 3 months later. The crew is falling apart. The murder is done. They've solved their stuff, and Yu is getting real sad and real confused, not knowing who he is without his friends, and realizing that his friends were just like friends of convenience. Like they were there to do a thing. The thing's over. They've all abandoned him. Then he's in his room trying to find something on the Midnight Channel, and like a big ominous voice talks to him about how he's not enough. And some light happens, and Yosuke pulls him out. So what happened is the shadow hit him with the in-game status effect Despair. So that was all. So the shadow transformed and tagged the protagonist with this like vision to like get him out of the fight, and he gets snapped out of it by Yosuke, and that's why the battle's already happening.
But that is just like very poorly explained in the show.
I feel like even without having knowledge of the game, I feel like they do a good enough job of, with the cut being so frantic and the like Yosuke pulling him out of that moment.
Yeah.
I feel like the context of like this fight's been happening while he's been there. I feel like that context is there.
I mean, I kind of like figured it out, but it was still like they didn't even really attempt to explain it after the fact. It was just like, that's just what happened. They're just kind of, you're meant to just assume.
In his room, the shadow is like strangling him and like telling him to like give up when Yosuke rescues him.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's enough there and that it makes sense, but I guess your mileage may vary on that one. Yeah. And then they beat him up. They confront the otaku, who Jess is like, yeah, I did it. Yep, that was me. But then his shadow just sort of disappears. He doesn't get a persona. Like the shadow's just like, all right, whatever, and just goes out skis. Yeah, and then they have like a celebratory party for his arrest, and Nanako's just like really happy to like have friends over. She's a very lonely little girl. She has such a rough life, and I love her. And then she and Teddy promise to go on play dates, and then they start talking about the summer festival. And then it's the end of season 1, but we get a couple of filler episodes where Protag's coming home late consistently, and Dojima finally like confronts him at dinner one day, and he tells him what's going on, but we don't see this because this episode's told from Nanako's perspective. And so Nanako's just like, oh, big bro's not coming home as often, and she's getting sadder and sadder and more confused about it. And so she's out of the room when we hear what's happening. And so she dresses up as her favorite detective to go figure out what's happening. She eventually runs into the gang, and they also can't figure out what's happening. And then we go to the summer festival, and there's some very nice moments. We watch Protag interact with some people that at this point we don't know about, but they like all leave the interaction happier with having met him.
But everyone like thinks that he's like dating multiple women, because he's seen with a couple middle-aged women, and then he's seen with an older woman, and everyone's like, is he really doing this?
So then that episode wraps itself up because they're like, well, whatever he's doing, he's helping people. The next episode is that same chunk of time, just from the protag's perspective and with him telling you what's going on. So this is a little mock-up story of all of the ways that you can spend your afternoon time and acquiring some social links. Within the context of the story, Nanako gives this fox her umbrella to keep him dry in the rain. And then when she gets home without her umbrella, Dojima's asking her about it, and she's like, oh, I lost it. Protag sees the same umbrella on sale for 8,000 yen. And he's like, I don't have money, or 8 or maybe 80,000 yen. And he just doesn't have money. And then he runs into the fox, and then the fox is like, hey, blah, 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 blah. The fox doesn't talk, but the fox gets him to answer this shrine wish board. The fox is a social link. You progress the fox's social link by doing these weird cryptic wish challenges. So that's one of the aspects. And then another one is, so with the one woman, she is the mother of a child at the daycare center that Protag can have a part-time job in. We get to watch that social link. It's very lovely. Another one is a kid who Protag tutors as a part-time job / social link. And then the third woman is a woman who you meet while fishing. And if you've played the game, you will never touch a fishing rod in your life. I've spent so many hours of my life in that goddamn fishing bit. And so you watch all of their stories and a few other moments. And with the older woman, the grandmother aged woman, she goes to the hospital, which is where Protag meets a nurse. And then the nurse is another one of the older women that they thought he was dating. Really, it's just there for fans of the game to go oh. Well,
I mean, the whole time I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, these are clearly just all side quests that you can probably do, they just wanted to fit them in somewhere. Yeah, because with a game as long as Persona is, I'm sure there's so much content that they could take and, make into something. So it was good.
The rest of the show kind of goes off crazy. So basically what has happened up until this point is the show really quickly gets you through with a little bit of stopping for things like the school festival. It really quickly gets you through up until the last dungeon / plot arc. And then it stops and gives us some of these backgrounds. And then the next half of the show is wrapping up the show. So with that in mind, we're going to cut here for me to go, hey, Forrest, would you add this to your list?
Yeah, I think I would. I think this is honestly when I'm going to talk about my comparisons to JoJo, because I think this is probably the best time to do that, because I do love this show. I did like it significantly. I mean, I didn't really have any preconceived notions about how I would feel about it. I went into it so blind that I was I don't know anything about the plot structure of this show. I loved all the characters. I felt like they're all very compelling in their own way, and there's not really any that I don't like. I mean, Rise is a good character, but she's not that present. She shows up, for important moments, but she's probably the character I felt the least about. I love Kanji and Naoto. We haven't even really touched on Naoto because we haven't even got to their arc yet. But so when I was watching this show, the whole time I was wow, this just feels like I'm watching less strange JoJo Part 4. It takes place in a small Japanese town. It deals with serial murders. All of the main characters get supernatural powers, and they end up doing a lot of slice of life stuff for a long time, and then they eventually start to get closer to the murderer, and then bam, everything happens. It's a very similar plot structure, and I'm saying this not because I genuinely think it's bad, because I think this show really takes a lot of those concepts, or this series takes a lot of those concepts, and does good things with it. It has a completely different feel from JoJo Part 4, even though it's taking a lot of similar plot structure. That being said, I think I like Part 4 of JoJo more because I feel like for me, there's just a little bit more personality. Like, I think the characters are probably developed better in Persona 4 because JoJo, I think, is kind of like a little lackluster on the character development side of things. But I feel like it's so hard for me to not just like compare those two when I was watching it. Anyway, like music wise, I really like that. Like the openings were super good. The animation style / art style, I think, aren't like my absolute favorite. I just feel like the art style in this series doesn't really have any unique, like any aspects that really set it apart from anything. Like it doesn't feel like a generic anime art style, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's trying anything very unique, if that makes sense. Like the characters' designs are good, but they're nothing like outstanding in my opinion. I just honestly I can't get around like the way the faces look because I just feel like there's nothing there that just like makes them pop. But it's like when you look at like the JoJo art style or something, like you can tell that that's the JoJo art style. But it's like when I look at the Persona art style, I think it looks incredibly similar to like the Fire Emblem Three Houses art style. Like those are pretty like I don't care for the Three Houses art style for the same reasons I don't care for the Persona art style. Anyway, sorry I'm like going on a rant, but I would add it to the list still because I do think everything is compelling enough to keep you interested and keep you going throughout the whole thing. I really enjoyed the whole experience all the way through. What about you, Jack?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. I'm honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the anime. It is a fair bit different than the game, although I will say I'm not entirely sure how much of it being different from the game is like little tweaks in between 4 and 4 Golden, as far as the game is concerned, and how much is actually genuinely different between the game and the anime. It's nice, it's fun. There are bits of it being a comedy anime that just don't hold up. High school comedy anime have scenes that are in high school comedy anime, not because they serve a purpose, but because they are scenes that have to exist in a high school comedy anime. This show has those too, and they're not great because they're just bad concepts for scenes. But yeah, for the most part, like I love the characters. I think everybody's presented very well. I think you get a good feeling for who everybody is. Teddy and Yosuke can go jump in a lake. Apart from that, everyone else is fine or perfect, depending on the character. Yeah, I like it quite a bit. It's very much like you get the feeling for Persona, like the music and like the stylized, like it's all very stylized in a way that is very iconic. I was trying to turn iconography into an adjective, but no, that's just iconic. Iconographic, I think, is where I was going. It's very much Persona 4. I would add it to the list. If you're going to play the game and don't care about the plot, but like care about like having like being in the moments as a player, watch it. Like watch the whole thing and then play the game. If you wanted to play the game but didn't want to sit down for quite as long, this is only 26 episodes versus, 100 plus hours. If you've been interested in the Persona franchise or if Persona 5 made you want to look back at the rest of the franchise, this is good for those reasons. Or if you just want to have a high school, like, paranatural anime, this is also good for that. What I will say is I think the art style is fine. Like, it's starting to show its age a bit, but it's just an anime. It's not outstanding. It's not bad, though. And as far as the characters go, I think they're really well designed, actually, because they're just people. They're not like particularly interesting to look at, but that's because most people are not particularly interesting to look at, right? Like they're not, like no one character looks that iconic, but that's because they're people existing in a world, and that's kind of the point, is that they are just like regular dudes. Yeah, so I guess the question is, do we want to mad dash through the last of it, or do we just want to take like a couple, like 10, 15 minutes to like special shout out scenes from like the last half of the show?
I mean, I think we can just go through the last section of the story. Because, I mean, I think we can probably kind of just skip past those filler stuff. Because, like, there was, like, some filler episodes that I don't think we need to talk about. Because if someone's going to watch it, they'll see them. And, like, they don't impact the plot really. It's just more chances to get to know the characters, you know.
Yeah. So we get a summer recap episode. And that's what those are. They go back to school. They have a school trip. This school trip, even within the context of the game, exists in case you played Persona 4 for you to go, or Persona 3, so that you can go, oh, that's where Persona 3 happened. And so for me, I was like, oh, that's where Persona 3 happened. It's very fun. Naoto joins the crew at this point during the school trip. There's another comedy moment for comedy in air quotes for the homophobia of sharing a room together with the gay guy.
Well, wait, did we like skip over Naoto's like?
No, that hasn't happened yet.
But then I didn't think Naoto like became part of their little friend group until after that.
Nope, Naoto joins the crew on the school trip. So it's summer episode from Nanako's perspective, summer episode from full perspective. School trip. And during the school trip, they're like, we should make friends with Naoto. And then they do.
You'd think I'd remember since I watched this all in like the last 2 days.
Yeah. We get Chie's like capstone social link moment, which is very fun. It's very cool. We get an awkward comedy moment in a club. This is after Naoto's part of the crew, and we get Naoto's story. At this point, Naoto is still using masculine pronouns and presenting himself as a male student. And basically, he tells us that is from a long line of prodigy detectives. The last one in the line was his grandfather, and so he has been living up to the expectations that he will be a great detective. In the next episode, Naoto's just like, yeah, I don't think this is over. The crew has like this doesn't feel right. Naoto goes and does an interview on TV and then is on the Midnight Channel, where there's like this mad detective shadow for Naoto. I like to call this the trans rights shadow, because this entire arc is like, I'm going to give you a surgery, right? Like the shadow's like strapped Naoto down to a table to like do like, the implication is like gender reaffirming gender surgery, but like the only thing that we see the shadow do is hit other people with like an aging ray. But yeah, we sort of get this like perspective of like Naoto, it was born a female, and Naoto being from a tradition of a very masculine dominated field was not able to pursue that in a way that was not getting them ridiculed. And so between that and consuming like media and books where there's like these very hard-boiled masculine like film noir Humphrey Bogart style detectives, they'd begun presenting in a masculine manner. And they sort of have like this nice moment where Naoto's like, yeah, I can be good at my job regardless of my identity. And that's like their whole moment there. We don't really get to see the implications of that in the show because everything's boiled through, but moving forward, they're referred to with feminine pronouns, and in the game it's sort of more up for interpretation, but we're at the point where, as far as the anime presents it, Naoto is comfortable in her identity as a woman. Kanji has a very cool moment in the shadow fight, where he's like, yeah, I fucking know what it's like to be denying like a side of you that society does not encourage. It's really nice.
I was going to say that Naoto has my favorite character design by far. I love Naoto's character design.
I like what Naoto walks around in. I hate her persona. Her persona's like this little Mothman wearing like an Angus Young like schoolboy outfit.
But I mean, that's not even the character design, so
it's true, and you don't have to see it as much in the show as you do in the game. She is very useful in game, and I have to see that dumb little Mothman a lot. I don't remember who says this, but I did write down it's either Kanji as he's about to kick ass or Naoto's shadow, but there is the line, it's time to reassign some body parts. So that's something in the dub. Yeah, and then from that point forward, quick shout out. If you've played the game, you know that you do the rainy day beef bowl challenge. Until all of your social stats are maxed, you do the beef bowl challenge because you have very limited time in the day, and it's the most effective way to do that. There are a few moments in the show where they bring up the beef bowl. I pop hard every time. After Naoto awakens her persona, the next day they go to the beef bowl, and Protag finishes his beef bowl challenge. It's very good. I love it a lot. It's like, yes, you do feel accomplished. Now, so Nanako and Dojima are sort of having fights because Nanako is feeling like he's becoming more and more distant. In her defense, Dojima is focusing on like work and trying to find her mom's killer, which just sort of is like a very real moment, but it doesn't do much. Really awkward scene where we establish that Naoto has big old titties. Not a lot happens until like there's like 4 or 5 episodes where nothing too terribly plot important happens. Then we run into the next culprit, who is this delivery driver. He kidnaps Nanako because he She
randomly ends up on TV.
I guess we are at the point where I can just say full spoilers. There's this delivery driver who used to be involved with the TV reporter that was the first murder. He's gone crazy, basically, because he has started to see the Midnight Channel and has gotten it into his head that he can save people from dying if he puts them in the TV before the murderer can get to them. So he sees Nanako on the TV because Nanako gets interviewed by like one of the news stations about a thing. He hurts my sweet, sweet summer child. They run in, they hunt him down, they figure it out. They beat him up. Nanako, when she leaves the TV world, is deathly sick, like in the ICU on a machine sick. And then she dies.
Yeah, I don't understand why she got so sick.
Well, it's already established that like the Midnight Channel takes a lot out of you, and she is like 5.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Like it's just like the effects.
Well, and she also had like a cold beforehand, so she was like already a little sick. And yeah, she just wouldn't get better, and then she just bites the dust.
Yeah. You're not wrong. It's just in this context.
It's very sad. I was very angry because I was like, there is no way that Nanako is dead. She's too good of a character.
Even knowing what happens, like,
and she just wants to be happy with her.
She just wants to be happy, man. Even knowing what happens, I'm like, oh God, oh no. Yeah. So it's weird because in the game, Nanako doesn't die. So Nanako dies, and then at this point, the delivery driver's still in the hospital as well. And so basically, the crew go and like break into his room, and like people are like, well, we need to interrogate him. But all of the guys are like, oh, we're killing him. He's the reason Nanako's dead. We're killing him. And Prote gets as far as like dragging him by the collar to the big TV in his room and like is starting to push him in, and then like makes the morally correct decision of like, I can't do this. We'd be no better than he is. In the game, it's one of those Nanako wouldn't want this type of things. Yeah, and then Nanako comes back to life in a really awkward moment. In the game, rather than that, so in the game, Nanako's in intensive care, and you can then, with the guy who you caught red-handed, as far as you know at this point, you can then choose to shove him in the TV. And in the game, if you choose to shove him in the TV, then Nanako dies. Then the game hard ends, cuts you to the end of the school year, where Dojima goes, it's going to be real quiet without you around here, and then you leave. But if you're like, no, hang on, something's not right here, then you actually get the true ending.
Well, and so that's why it's so odd that like they have a whole emotional scene with her like dying and like her heartbeat stopping, and then she comes, and this is probably the only thing that this is probably the biggest like plot point gripe that I have with this show. Clearly, like the way you've explained it, like this isn't an issue in the game because there's multiple ways this can go. But in the show, for some goddamn reason, they're like, Kuma is the reason she survives because she like sees him in a dream or something. I thought it was him like disappearing. I thought it was him like realizing like, oh, he does have a purpose, and then he gave up his life so that she could come back to life. But then no, he's still alive and she just somehow comes back to life. And everyone's like, oh my God, is this a miracle? And I was like, if that's the case, then Teddy should have just stayed dead for good. That should have been the end of Teddy. And that should have been his whole purpose, is to bring Nanako back to life.
It is very weird in the show because like Teddy disappears after Nanako's dies, and they're like, well, where is Teddy? We have bigger things to worry about right now. And like he's like in this like shadowy despair area, and like, yeah, like what, like it is very much set up like, oh, Teddy's disappearing to bring Nanako back, but it's nowhere in the game. It's very weird. I don't like it. And so basically at that point they piece it together and like, oh, hang on, it's Adachi. Adachi, the shitty new detective, is the one who's been doing this. And then they go to confront him, and he's like, I don't need to put up with this. And then he runs away, and they're like, oh, okay, cool, let's go after him.
I mean, that's also after the delivery man, like, tells them that he was kind of manipulated. And then they're like, oh, so if this guy wasn't intentionally trying to kill these people, then, like, maybe he wasn't actually the person that killed the first two people. And that was kind of where they kind of put two and two together, and they're like, there's only one person who like is familiar with all of us and could have even been familiar with the first two murdered women.
Yeah.
And it's Adachi.
Yeah. And then they confront Adachi. He runs and escapes into the TV. They go to hunt him down. Honestly, there's a very cool like climax to the story. It's cooler than it is in the game, because in the game you're kind of forced into dealing with Adachi, because like Adachi can summon the same persona as Protag,
which is like unexplained,
except so he is the same arcana as the Protag. He's like he's Protag if Protag went dark with it, right? So like rather than like finding meaning and strength in his connections and bonds, what if he went fuck the world?
Yeah.
Let's ruin everything.
And that's like his whole motivation, really. And I didn't really care for it. Like, I was just kind of like, this is meh. It's like,
not particularly deep.
He's just like, I hated everyone. I hate the world. And you don't know what it's like to be lonely. And then they're like, but we fucking do. You idiot.
It's weird. So, like, in the game, you have to social link with Adachi in the game. And I hate it every time, because all of its permutations of, oh, you're like me. You also know how terrible it feels to be put out in the middle of nowhere, and like Adachi is like super resentful. So Adachi straight up says, yeah, I became a cop so I can carry a gun, which is very funny to me. But so like Adachi's whole thing is he's always been a bit of a psychopath. He's always been a bit of a sociopath. Like the way that he talks and describes it to himself is like, yeah, I've always just sort of been a bad dude. But then he graduated from the police force of like top of his class, and then they stuck him in Inaba, and he just like grew resentful. And then he like grew crazier and like started hyperfixating on that TV reporter who's the first one who died. He went to her hotel room when like the story was like breaking out, and it's like, hey, you're a hussy, be a hussy with me. And she turns him down, and so he like gets violent with her and accidentally shoves her into the TV. And then he's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. And then so with Saki, he is the one behind it all. And basically he's like, yeah, I'm merging the shadow world and the human world. Deal with it. And then there's this very cool moment where when they go to catch up with what they think is him, a Reaper, which is like the game's like you will not beat this enemy, shows up as sort of like a mini boss. And then Naoto and Kanji like are like, we'll take care of this, you guys go on ahead. Very awesome. It happens again. This time Yukiko and Chie do it, and then the next time it's Yosuke and Teddy, and then you 1v1s them.
Wait, but where was Rise and all that?
Rise is with Yukiko and Chie, but Rise,
but she's just kind of like a support.
Rise is a non-combatant. Yeah, she doesn't have a combat persona.
Yeah, but then like they all get there. We're friends. And we're here for you.
Basically what it is Azachi's like, yeah, everybody's alone. Life is pointless. There's no reason to any of this. And if you think otherwise, you're tricking yourself. Life's about suffering for 80 years of lying to yourself and then dying. So when everybody becomes a shadow, we'll be free of that. Everyone's like, oh no, that's bullshit. Like all of them call him out on it. And then we get to watch everybody's personas evolve. In the game, when you get their social link to 10, they unlock. So like you get your persona for accepting and like not running away from like whatever like the hidden bits are, and then it evolves when you've like actualized yourself, which is what you accomplish over the course of your social links with them. So we get to watch that happen. It's very cool. That's how. So they defeat Adachi, and then they fight this big old eyeball. That's like the thing that creates the mist, and it's like I just react to human desires, and I'm creating humans' desires, and humans' desire to be distracted in escape, basically. And then they beat it off. and then we get our goodbye moment, and then we have a final episode that's like the true ending boss fight that's not really that important. Yeah, Persona's weird. So Persona 3 is very death-themed, but Persona 4 in particular is like the power of the collective subconscious and like the desires of people. And in Persona 4, the message is kind of like, because bear in mind, this game came out in like 2008. Like the message is kind of like TV and like your phones have kind of been like what's distracting. Like people are like receding into TV and like technology to like really escape their life. And then in Persona 5, which, you know, came out in 2016, the big theme is like smartphones. Like it's like the main plot device. It's like all of that. And so like Persona is like a weird like morality tale almost in the past couple of games, and it's like I don't know what's going on. But like yeah, that's like the like big confrontation is like people don't want to like be alone. They don't want to suffer, so we're just going to be doing this.
Well, and I think that the big kind of deal at the end of this series is like this being that's kind of like a god that like can basically reacts to human desires. You know, it like tries to it's just doing what it thinks people want, and then like you and company show up and are like, no, like humans need to like exist, you know, and like humans have, you know, goals and things that they want to do and bonds, and like it's pretty heavy handed because like it's like the thing that like caps off the end of like almost every episode, where it's like the bonds you make are your strength or something like that. You know, it's like all about like how friendship like, you know, brings people together, and that's kind of the big moral, I guess, quandary of the whole show. But it's good.
The big takeaway, this show slaps. The game slaps also. If you're going to watch this show and you're thinking about watching Golden, watch this show first. Because if you're only going to play one, play Persona 4 Golden. Because really there's no reason to go back and playing base Persona 4. If you're going to watch both this and then watch Persona 4 Golden. Because Golden is a mini-series, which is literally just the added content when they re-released the game as Persona 4 Golden. So don't watch Golden instead of this. Don't watch Golden and then this. Play Golden first if you want. Watch it if you want, but watch it after you've consumed the franchise. Also, listen to Aria of the Soul. It's the soundtrack song for whenever they're in the Velvet Room.
That's a good song. I was going to say something about... I was going to say the ending of this show... I personally know that a show is good when like the ending comes around and I'm like, God damn, this is actually really sad to like leave these characters. That happened to me with like JoJo Part 4 too, because that's like my favorite part of JoJo's. But it's just like when you know that you're watching a series where like this is the only time these characters show up really, and it's like you get to the end of it and it's like you know you're not going to be around these characters anymore, and like there's always like, you know, those farewells, and like that at the end of this show, I knew I was like, yeah, this show is good because like I'm seeing these characters say goodbye to each other, and I'm like, God damn it, this sucks. I don't want this to end. I don't want them to like part ways now.
Well, it's even in this show in particular, it's even mirrored in the show because main character like Protag is only here because he has to spend a year living there but the year's over, so he goes home, and so the ending is people being sad at a train station, and so it's like, oh, but I am them. I am sad at a train station right now.
But then they also
High art thou.
That final episode kind of like brings everything full circle, I feel like, in a good way. But
I will say, no matter how many times I consume this media, whenever they are as a full crew coming together to help make Nanako be happy, whenever they're like giving Nanako that like big happy family moment.
I mean, yeah, it's just it's very sad. Wholesome.
It's so good. It's a good show. Anyway, I don't do social media because I'm bad at it. I have a Facebook account, but I don't do anything with it.
I don't do anything with mine either.
But Forrest, you do have some forms of internet identity.
Yeah, I post music on YouTube on a pretty frequent basis. I go by the artist name Bustello, Bustello, and then I have another project called Prism Ship as in SHIP, and yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I guess you can follow me on Twitter. I don't know, or Instagram. I've been trying to actually post on those platforms more frequently because if you want to have music on the internet, you have to have some form of internet presence, I guess.
This is the most lackadaisical call to action I've ever heard. We've done call to actions that had more emphasis.
Please listen to my music because I've been working very hard on it. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.